All right.
All right, let me try this again. All right.
Is that the first one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to let you know I use a Canon and a Kraken strobe, a Kraken burst, and some solar lights. Yeah, my rig is pretty heavy, but everything put together just works for me. So I'm just going to go through. I have different textures, people I dive with, just things that just strike my fancy underwater. So the last 5 years I've been taking pictures underwater and I'm loving it. And sometimes I find some unique things like this vase with the brittle stars. So this is Maldives, and I'll let you know when we get to Bonaire. But I'm just going to go through and just take a peek at them. And, you know, I use different angles. Sometimes I use different slides for colors. So here we go.
Look at that.
That's the attendees.
This I used a internal filter in my camera. I thought I'd try it. It ruined all the colored pictures, but because I put it on big eye in the camera, I used some different settings in my camera. I figured why not? This was the second day with the mantis, but it did ruin the color photos, but the black and whites came out really nice.
Yeah, this looks great.
It just gave a whole different perspective. I mean, we literally were taking pictures in the same spot for 2 hours, like 1 hour one day and 1 the next. So I thought I'd try some new stuff because you never get a redo usually. But my second day, the colors didn't come out good, but I just was playing around with my camera, and when do I get to do that? So that's pretty cool. That's hollow actually on the right. These are some new nudies that we saw in Maldives. They were so pretty. Frogfish.
Whoa.
Oh, there's.
Okay, I'm really proud of this because I chase, oh God, now I'm gonna forget what they're called. I chased these in Bonaire, and the triggerfish, they never posed for me. They posed in Maldives like you wouldn't believe. So I was really proud of this. That's Captain America. I mean, Sean.
Sorry, were you saying that you were chasing the triggerfish?
No, in Bonaire, I try to chase them to get a photo, and I can't even get a tail. I mean, they run for me all the time. In Maldives, they just pose. I love it. So.
Okay, just maybe a quick word to anybody. Triggerfish can be extremely dangerous. If they're nesting, you don't want to go, their nest is on the bottom, and it goes in a cone shape up to the surface, and they can give really nasty bites.
Right.
So
That species in particular is really aggressive.
But in Bonaire, I can't even get like 200 feet to them. So I didn't literally mean chasing them. I just meant I can't even get them in my camera frame. So in Maldives, they just hang out. They're everywhere. In Maldives, they were actually literally everywhere. So you could take a couple of photos and they didn't care, and they just moved along. So here we go. This is a mantis shrimp. And I was elated I got to see one.
Nice color.
Out of maybe 300 shark photos, that's about the closest, or one that even was even mildly crisp and clear. And that's pretty much how far the sharks were away from us all the time. So, but I'm not much of a shark person, so I was fine with that. This is just a texture I love. I love seeing these curly, I don't even know what they are, but I just love seeing them, and I love the texture on this one. These are just some nurse sharks that were hanging out. This was so much fun. They called it the circus. It was just shallow, the boats come in and out, and they literally land like jet planes, jumbo jet planes next to you, and they bounce. They come down and they bounce. It's so cool. And
That's nice.
yeah, so those were fun. There were actually 4 of them that day. And this so I tried to get the 4 in my frame shot, but the guide came and tugged on my fin, and I'm like, okay, so you pointed to go look at them, but you don't want me to take a photo. Okay, so then later he saw these and pointed, and I said, well, can I go and take a picture? And he said, go. And I was like, okay, thank you. So they were beautiful. I love them. This is my friend Mary posing, as she does in a lot of my photos. We have so much fun. So when I was in Fiji, I saw soft corals like this, and they were just beautiful in Maldives also. And of course, the turtle helps. That's our guide. And this is how tiny this little nudie that was
Wow.
So I got a nice angle with this lionfish. It was fun. This is a shipwreck, and I always try to get some of the florals, the soft corals and the flowers, whatever, they're just beautiful. But if you don't shine a light on them, you never know how beautiful they are, and they're there. So I have fun with this. This is Mary posing again. Clownfish. I believe I got that right. There's a lot in the Maldives. They're beautiful. And this is what I mean on a shipwreck. If you don't get close enough and you don't shine a light on them, you don't know how beautiful the flowers are, or the soft corals. You know, the growth is just beautiful. Oh, we're to Bonaire. So I went to Bonaire, and Brian Weber was there with me, and we kind of got stuck in a bait ball, and I had my new wide angle lens. And so I was trying to do above and underwater photos, and actually I was exhausted here. So I went up, because we had been in the water a very long time because it was shallow. And I looked down and I went, wow, that looks cool. And so I tried some under and over pictures, and it was a lot of fun. So this is another one. Like I said, I was exhausted. I was underwater so long. Usually after an hour and a half, I like to come up and breathe real air. And Brian was still having fun with the bait ball, taking photos. And I went, wait, is that a pelican? Oh my God, it took me like 20 shots to get this photo. My camera's so heavy when it comes out of the water. It was actually very exhausting to pull that camera up and get the shot, but it was fun. And with the sailboat and the sky, it was cool. And the bait ball below.
Great shot.
So, and this is another, I love the angles of the fish, and with the dock coming down. I love this photo.
Where is the dock?
Just past that.
That Bachelor's Beach, isn't it Nirvana or something like that?
Yeah. Yep.
So there's Brian, and that's what I mean. He was still underwater, just doing his thing, taking photos. And I love these photos. I love getting people in the photos, like with the bait balls, or with you know, the nature underwater with the fish. It just gives a perspective. And So this is gonna be a bait ball that Brian was consumed in what they call them, the metafish. They're in the jack family. So here Brian's getting engulfed by the bait ball of the mackerel, and then inside the bait ball, he's taking pictures of the jacks going by. It's just like the coolest perspective. But I was shooting into the sun, and my camera and I have been together 5 years now, and I've learned that if I'm shooting into the sun, I'm just going to get dark fish and I'm not going to get their faces. So I did some really weird settings on this, opened up the ISO a lot, and I shot at a fast speed. And so again, the colors all got washed out, but I was able to save it. But it's just really weird how shallow it was. Shallow, bright sun, and it still came out, the video. So it was tough to shut everything down, but then open it up so you could actually see the faces of the fish and not all have silhouettes.
So is this a still from the video?
No, this is it.
A still by itself?
No. Can you see the video? Yes or no?
Oh, I can see that there is a video, but
If you're going to show a video, you need to stop the share and start it again and click the box at the bottom that says that you're including videos.
Oh, okay. Could you see any of it?
it didn't come out
It's
as
just
a video.
series of stills.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't say that again. I don't even know.
Stop the share. Stop the share.
Okay, I don't know how to stop the share.
See the thing that said share the screen?
Yeah,
There we go. Good. Then go back into share screen
yeah.
like you did before.
Yeah.
And down at the bottom, probably, there's a checkbox that says optimize for video or something along those lines.
Yes.
Click, make sure you check that before you share.
Okay. All right, I don't know what I did. I might have done something wrong. All right, so I'll try it again. And if not, it's okay. I just thought it was fun to see the different perspective.
Yeah, that's much better.
Yeah, much better. Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah, and then Brian gets swallowed up by the bait ball. And it was just, I don't know, it was just an amazing day.
Well, so it'd be exciting.
So that's pretty much it. So that was my presentation, and
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Paul.
you're welcome.
Nice job. Very, very pretty. Did you, in the Maldives, was it a resort?
No, it was a liveaboard.
Oh, it was a liveaboard. Oh, nice.
Looks like you saw a lot of great stuff in the Maldives. So
Every day was epic. Yeah, I'm going back in November. Yeah, and my friend Mary, she's my international dive buddy. She doesn't think she wants to go to Grenada anymore, since that's the only place she's ever been since she started diving after like 150 dives. So she was like, let's do Maldives again. And I said, okay. So I pried her away from Grenada, which I love Grenada because she's there and we have fun diving. But she's going to come to Bonaire again also. So Maldives was epic every day. The mantis shrimp. And like I said, triggerfish are my favorite fish. I always wanted to get a photo of them. I have about 10 beautiful photos. And so you don't, all the fish are just there and they just don't swim away. And that's what's amazing, is they're not skittish. And to get an underwater critter in your frame is not hard at all. It's actually rather easy. And nobody's moving too fast. The fish aren't moving too fast. They're just hanging out. And the only thing I really had to go towards were that bait ball. They were all jacks, and they're huge fish. And even though I presented a picture of them up close, seeing a whole bait ball of jacks is just amazing. And they were like a tornado funnel going up to the, up.
Wow.
So I had a lot of fun catching up to them and taking some photos of them in different perspectives. And yeah, so my wide angle lens that is new to me since last June seems to perform very well. And matter of fact, I use that the whole time, even with small items. So I wasn't switching lenses because I'd never been to Maldives and the currents were pretty swift. And I wasn't going to be hanging out trying to fiddle around because I have a bayonet system. I can snap a wide angle or a macro on in a second, but not with the current. I didn't risk that at all.
Smart move. Yeah. Otherwise, if you somehow drop it in a strong current, it's a goner.
Yeah. So it was the performance of my wide angle was amazing, and just the clarity of the water and the plentiful critters underwater. Yeah, that's why we're going back in November. Yeah.
But look forward to seeing the pictures from the next trip then.
Thank you.
So you said that triggerfish. You said that triggerfish is your favorite. I got some good news for you.
What's
The
that?
one that was black with the white spots on the bottom,
Yeah.
that you thought was a clownfish or an enemy fish, that's a triggerfish. It's
Oh, that's a
Picasso
trigger
triggerfish.
also?
Yeah.
But isn't it called?
Yeah. So you have,
I think it's called the clown triggerfish though, because I looked it up in the books. But
Picasso triggerfish. Yeah.
yeah, but there were so many different varieties. And matter of fact, there were small triggerfish everywhere you went. They were just among you everywhere, all over, like the purple ones. They were smaller and they were just everywhere, just like plentiful, just casual fish. So I was in heaven because there were triggerfish everywhere. And like I said, I could never get a photo of one in a frame even. If I got within 100 feet of them, 50 feet of them, I'd take snaps, but I could never zoom in and crop enough to get a clear picture. But there were plenty. Yeah, there were plenty, and they weren't aggressive. Nobody was getting too close, and I never do anyway. I crop, my wide angle can crop up to 200%. So, and that's what I love about it. So, yeah.
Well, great. Thank you again. It was very, very good.
Thank you.
So next we're going from the Maldives to Snoot. Jake, Jake has just told us he's going to be away for a year. So that was a reason for back-to-back months for having Jake take advantage of him being here. So Jake is going to talk about just a beginning how-to on Snoot photography. So, Jake, actually, I have got a Snoot. I've never used it, so I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Great. Well, so I say it's an intro to Snoot because I'm by no means a professional Snoot photographer. I'm still learning myself. I've only really been shooting with it for the past year or so. And there's a few different types of snoots out there, many more than these three, but these are three general kind of ones. The one that I shoot with here is the Retro LSD light shaping device. It's a higher end snoot, it's very nice. It fits on most strobes. It's on a retro strobe right here, but I use it with CNC strobes. Then you have something called a fiber optic snoot, where you have two different places that you can light. So that can be used in a little bit different situations to light two objects, sometimes one in the foreground, one on the side, and you can move the arms around. So you get very different lighting without having to move a strobe arm with the snoot and the strobe itself. And then another one over here, which is Backscatter's newest product, Backscatter Mini Flash with their optical snoot attachment. Now, obviously, what is a snoot? These are three variations of that. A snoot attaches to the end of a strobe, whether it's this strobe here, a retra, or a Backscatter Mini Flash, and it angles the beam of light down from very, very wide to a very small area. So you're only lighting maybe one subject, part of a subject. For the retro snoot, you can change the size of the opening. So it has little inserts that you can insert in right here. And you can do a wider hole, smaller. Some of them have special like triangles and hexagons and stuff. Personally, I don't really see the point of using triangles and hexagons. I just prefer a straight circle. And then something like a fiber optic snoot is more fixed, so you have that one circle. Certain strobes like the retro will come with a focusing light. So on my strobe, I can turn the light on and it shines through the snoot to focus. Other ones like fiber optic snoots can't always do that. Some models you can attach lighting devices to that will pinpoint to where you're shooting. So it makes it easier for yourself as a photographer. So like I said, I'm fairly new to snoot photography. So I found it very difficult at first. The first dive that I did with them was in Boston Harbor. And I brought an assistant and I made this image. I brought an assistant down, and I apologize if any of you have seen this image before because I've shown this in a few talks that I've given. But it continually is one of my favorite images. And it's great for this presentation because it's really a testament to how powerful a snoot can be. This is only in 10 feet of water in a marina. Just a little skeleton shrimp climbing up a tunicate, but the snoot creates this beautiful fall off of light and this really rich background, very high contrast. It's pointed from directly above the skeleton shrimp, looking right down onto it. And on this dive, I had an assistant with me, like I said, a friend of mine who was holding this strobe with the snoot attached off camera, positioning it. And I worked out a whole series of hand signals to use with him so that we could communicate better underwater to figure out what kind of composition, what kind of lighting. And so after this, I had him assist me on a few other dives, but recently I've been getting more and more used to shooting without an assistant and having it on camera, which is a very big challenge in itself. So a lot of the photos you're going to see here are from either night dives in Fort Wetherill or are beneath the UNH pier in Newcastle, New Hampshire, because they're dark environments. And so I can see the little ring of light from the snoot and know where to shoot a little bit easier. In an environment that's full sun, for example, Folly Cove on the sand, it's very difficult, sometimes impossible, to see where you're shooting that little area. So it becomes a little bit more challenging to shoot with. So here, just a regular hermit crab in Fort Wetherill, using a snoot from directly above really, really accentuates the deep shadows. If I'm shooting with the regular strobe straight on, you might not get this. You certainly wouldn't get very deep shadows in here and the big fall off of light in the background. Now, I'd also like to say that from this point on, all the images are not edited. I'm not removing any backscatter, so I do a little bit of global editing, just highlight, shadow, stuff like that. But I didn't touch any of the backscatter because I wanted to illustrate that with a snoot, it becomes much more easily to manage backscatter. In certain images, like this one, there's obviously a lot of backscatter in this. The viz was only about half a foot on this dive. So even with half a foot of viz, you can get a fairly good image. And obviously where there's no backscatter on the side is where the light is not hitting. So where the light is hitting on this black sea bass, you get backscatter behind it. If the viz was maybe 2-3 feet, you'd see almost no backscatter, but there was a lot of particulate matter this night. Again, there's a very simple subject, a little anemone on a rock. By using a snoot, you get a big contour of the rock itself and see this kind of bowl shape of light with the perfect little anemone sitting on the inside. And so I like to use snoots not necessarily to get black backgrounds, but to accentuate texture, create different shapes within a subject that you can't necessarily get with just a strobe. Great example, this little box crab. I've photographed every box crab I see in Fort Wetherill. I really love them. They're so much fun. I've chased down quite a few of them walking around, and one time Andrea and I were photographing one of them, and I felt so bad. A black sea bass came over and ate it while we were photographing it. Good for the black sea bass, not so good for the poor little crab. But this one here wasn't eaten while I was photographing, unfortunately. But I'm shooting it with the snoot. It's in the sand, actually. All of this behind it is sand, and it was on a little rock surrounded by sand, but you don't see any of that sand. If I was to shoot it with a strobe, not snooted, then you would see the white sand behind it, and you wouldn't have nearly as much contrast between the white of the crab, its eyes, and the background. A coronet fish swimming in the water column. And then this is an image that is shot without a snoot. So this is with two strobes, no snoot. The strobes are both on either side of this anemone, and I wanted to show this image because I'm happy with this image, I like it. But when you shoot something without a snoot, or you're shooting with just two strobes straight on, the light hits something and reflects back into the camera. And it's a very wide burst of light, like I said, but when you're shooting with a snoot, you can get something like this, where you're not shooting the light onto something, but shooting it through something. And so a transparent subject like an anemone, the light just flows throughout all of its little tentacles, throughout its membrane, and you get a very different color form and textures than you would get with a straight snoot, or a straight strobe, I should say. These beautiful bursts of light, and then the very, very dark background wherever the strobe isn't hitting. Similarly, a northern Serianthid in the sand in Folly Cove, a little tiny Lacuna vincata sitting beneath it, a snail. Now, like I said before, I choose to shoot most of the time with the snoot in darker places so that I can see and manage it better. And somewhere like Folly Cove, where it was in full sun, this is only in about 15 feet of water, I couldn't see where it was going to hit, so it's a little bit of trial and error. And for an instance like that, I'll typically find a little rock or something on the bottom at the beginning of the dive, place it down on the ground, and then I'll photograph that little rock for maybe 5-10 minutes, however long it takes me to get the strobe dialed in and have it in one position so that I don't have to look at the light. I can have it wherever the camera is in focus, and I'll move it in and out to check the focus. Wherever it's in focus is where it's going to shoot the light. And so for something like this Serianthid, I'm sitting there looking at it. The second that I see its tentacles in focus, I take the photo, and the snoot shines here. In a situation like this, I also tend to use a little bit wider of a hole on the strobe, on the snoot, so that you get a wider field of view. So it's a little bit easier to manage where you're going to be shooting the snoot, because you're shooting a very small area. It's only about an inch diameter, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more, but that's around average. And so it's a small area that you're going to be lighting. And of course, however close or farther away you are from your subject changes how big the hole of light will be as well. This beautiful shag rug nudibranch at the UNH pier, just crawling along the bottom. This guy was about 4 inches long, so pretty big one. And again, if I was to shoot this with strobes, even if I had the strobes directly above the shag rug, like the position that it's used for this snoot, you would still see the background. It wouldn't be black. And that's simply because it's lighting a larger area without a snoot. So by using a snoot, I'm isolating the subject a little bit more in the frame to draw attention to it. I found this beautiful little Aeolus crawling up. I'm not exactly sure what part of a stick or something. And I was sat there for about 10 minutes photographing this one nudibranch. It's a little harder to shoot things that are not on the ground with a snoot, especially if they're on a wall or on something that's moving. This stick was moving back and forth a little bit. So it took a lot of trial and error, moving myself and the camera back and forth to get a spot where the face was perfectly in focus and where the snoot was hitting it. I found that most of the time that I'm shooting with a snoot, it's all just trial and error. Figuring out how to shoot it is different on every single dive for me. And this is from that same dive, a beautiful little young ocean pout. It's probably only about an inch long, so very small. And again, I'm using the snoot, in this case, the light is from directly above the subject, so right overhead, to get this very deep shadow beneath it. That adds texture to the image, it adds contrast, and for someone who might not be a diver, might not go in the ocean, it makes it a little bit more understandable, recognizable for them to see texture, patterns, see what a subject is. Other situations like this, beautiful little anemone on a mussel. Lighting them can be very challenging, so I'm using a very small beam of light on this one. I went down to the third smallest that I have, just to get the anemone and the small bit of the mussel to get that line from it leading up to it. Nothing in the foreground and nothing in the background. You can see this is in the middle of the day underneath the pier, but it's a perfect black background and very little backscatter. The vis on this dive was very good for the pier. I thought it was about 25 feet, so there was almost no backscatter in the water.
So were you able to see the outline of the, when you proofed that, were you able to see that outline in your viewfinder?
Outline of
Not
what?
your viewfinder.
The outline
So
of
it's on. Go ahead.
the outline of the mussel or the light itself?
Yeah, the outline of the mussel. Could you see that in your playback?
Yes, I could. So
Okay.
what I'm looking for photographing was if the anemone was lit correctly. And then while I'm looking at it on the back of the camera underwater, I saw the line of the mussel. So I adjusted the strobe a little bit, pulled it up so that it would be lighting a little bit more of the mussel to get that line in full. The first images I had were lighting just about this much of it. So you get some of the mussel on either side, but I wanted the full mussel to get that beautiful semicircle.
Yeah, that makes it a much more compelling photograph.
Yes.
Very nice.
One thing I really like to do with snoots is try to get texture shots or try to accentuate forms that you otherwise wouldn't necessarily see. So just very simple back of a black sea bass. Personally, I'm not bothered by backscatter in most shots, especially not in this one. I think it kind of adds to it as a little bit more of the texture. Then in an image like this, a detail of a sea lemon nudibranch. If I personally don't really care that if I show this to someone, they don't know that it's a sea lemon. Most people who aren't divers already don't know it's a sea lemon. But I really love the texture on sea lemons, and it's hard to get that texture to stand out really, really well with very high contrast. And so a snoot works extremely well in this case. And I'm only lighting half of the nudibranch in this case. It was a very kind of awkward position. It was half underneath a rock. The other half was right down here. And so it had a kind of bump up on the top here while it was curving around the rock. So I was able to position myself in the strobe to light only half of it, which worked very well in this case. And then something like this with just a regular sea star sitting on a clump of mussels. I really loved this line here of the two arms joining together. So I got down very low to it, the same level, again strobe right above it, get this beautiful fall off of light. strobes add a lot of texture and contrast to an image when they're snooted, and that works really, really, really well for underwater images. These are a couple images from Folly Cove. This is from the same shoot I got the Siriented image in. And like I said, it was full sun, so it's very hard to shoot with the strobe, so I couldn't see where the focus light was. This is only in about 20 feet of water. And wherever I saw focus was when I would shoot. And because I had positioned the strobe with the snoot beforehand, wherever I got focus, and I didn't refocus during the dive, wherever I got focus was where the light was hitting. And so that's a pretty easy way to make sure that you're getting both focus and light. And I wanted to end with this image also from the same dive, which has very fastly become one of my new favorite images, especially of nudibranchs. This beautiful Acanthodorus pilosa crawling up, possibly hookweed, maybe even Siphonia japonica. I'm not quite sure what the seaweed is. But by using a snoot, and the seaweed was moving back and forth, so I'm moving with the nudibranch and the seaweed. It's only lighting a little bit of the seaweed. It's not lighting any of the part beneath it. And of course, I didn't really see this while I was looking at it, but once I'm looking at the photo, this beautiful rectangle of the seaweed that this little nudibranch is crawling right along. And so I thought it was a very pleasing composition. I was very happy with it. And again, it's very high contrast on the nudibranch. You see every little detail of it because I'm shooting straight down onto it rather than putting light into it, which makes it for very, very high contrast. So these are only from maybe half a dozen dives or so. So once you start shooting with a snoot, it becomes much, much easier. They're not easy to manage when you first start shooting with them, but if you have a snoot, even if you make your own, just keep shooting with it because it will get easier and it very rapidly starts to make sense. Any questions?
Hey, Jake, I have a comment on the shape of the light.
Yes.
So I just got back from Manilow and I got to use the backscatter snoot for pretty much a week straight. And I started with the circular, but I ended up finding the ellipse worked better. And the reason why is because if you put your snoot at say a 45-degree angle into your subject, you can actually then turn the elliptical light into a circle. Or if you go straight overhead, you can pull it out and then you got a circle and you can move the snoot up and down to get the size. So it added some flexibility that I thought was kind of useful.
Yeah, I personally haven't shot with the ellipse yet. I don't have one of the ellipse sets for the Retra. I only have the circle and then one of the triangle or something. But okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. I'd definitely love to try that out at some point.
Jake, I've been trying a Kraken snoot with my strobe and my macro, and yesterday I went to Eastern Point Lighthouse and I had a better day than I did when there was some small dodos at Canoe Beach a few weeks ago, and my snoot was too close and it just made it glow white. Yeah. But I love how you're explaining exactly how when you use it, that portions, you start thinking different on portions of the actual item, whether it be a starfish or a sea lemon or whatnot. And the details they pop so much better. And I'm enjoying myself better with it with wetsuit gloves now with a dry suit than dry suit gloves, because my dry suit gloves really get in the way of moving all that stuff around.
Yeah, they certainly do.
The dry suit gloves was starting to move my settings on my camera. And I was like, oh no, I was shooting custom instead of what I wanted. And like, because I set everything up to begin with, just like you said, and within your focus range, know exactly where your focal range is, and set it up and do a few practice shots so you don't fry something. In other words, light it up so much that you can't see any detail.
Right.
But yeah, your pictures are beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Jake, I have a question. When you're obviously using the snoot as your main source of light, do you have to reduce the output from the strobe, or are you shooting full power?
It would depend a little bit on the subject. So obviously, like the white Acanthodorus pilosa, I turned the power down a couple notches just so I wouldn't blow them out.
Mhm.
But most of the time, I'm shooting close to full power. Because it's angling all that light into a smaller area, you have to put a little bit more light in to get it to be a better exposure. So generally I'm shooting like f/22 ISO 200-ish, then 1/80th of a second, and the strobe is generally on like f/22 power or f/32 power. With I say in quotes because it's never totally lines up with that, but yeah. So close to full power or full power.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Jake.
Thank
I
you.
have a question.
Okay.
As far as the nuts and bolts, are you committed to the snoot per dive, or you have a pocket you put it in? Do you, switch it on and,
Yeah. Personally,
juggling it?
committed to it. It's like I can't shoot photos and do video on the same dive. There's not many people I know that can do both successfully. It's the same thing. It's hard to shoot with a snoot and hard to shoot regular on the same dive. I will sometimes bring a strobe and have two strobes attached and just have one of them off without the snoot in case I see like a squid sitting in the water column or something that I want to photograph that a snoot wouldn't be appropriate for. And so then I'll turn it off, but I'm not usually repositioning it or anything because it's a big hassle, especially underwater, to reposition everything and try to set it all up again. So most dives I'll have dedicated to snoot.
Beautiful, beautiful textures. Yeah, nice.
Thank you.
Okay. Very nice. Great work. Very, very good. First, I want to thank you again, Jake, and I want to wish you the best trip.
Well, thank you very much.
Hope to see you and your work in a year from now. So
Absolutely. And I'll be at the Sea Rover show as well. I'm going to give a talk there.
okay. All right. Terrific. All right. Thank you. And then now we have Zach, who is going to show us images, some of his favorite images. Zach Whalen is, but I don't know from where these images are going to be, but we're all familiar with Zach's work and what he's done before. So, Zach, I don't even know where you are.
I'm over here somewhere.
No. I mean,
Oh.
Are you in Florida? Are you in Hawaii? Or where are you?
We're back in Boston right now.
Oh, okay.
For the moment, we're looking at summer travel, but we were in Mexico recently. We got stuck in Mexico. My tip is do not get COVID while in Mexico. It puts a damper on your dive trip. But we're back for the moment. Unfortunately, not diving just because we had COVID with symptoms. So we're leaving ourselves a breather for the moment of diving to let bodies fully recover before the next adventure. But I do have a selection of photos. Let's see, where's the so photos I have here are from all over. These days, as most people know, I shoot almost exclusively video. So I kind of dug through my archive a little bit to find still photos, things that I took exclusively as stills, rather than frame grabs. So as Jake mentioned, it's really hard to shoot video and stills in a dive. So typically you want to stick to one, and most of my commercial work has been video. So I shoot video, then go back in, I film in 4K or higher and grab frames. So that's most of my work now with stills, is grabbing frames. So this is a brief selection of work of actual still photos that I took. starting with one here from Bonaire. This is the bow of the Himmel hooker. Most people don't swim all the way out to the bow. But my buddy and I decided we wanted to see the whole wreck. We swam out, and I put this in a couple of contests and actually placed and won a contest with this. The first image I ever won an underwater photo contest with. This is one that shoot I did a couple years ago that's important to me. I think it's important to remember why we all got into this. So these are leopard sharks in San Diego. This is snorkeling, natural light. They're really skittish. But this is why I started scuba diving. At 13, I swam with sharks for the first time, and it changed my perception on sharks and the ocean. And it went from scary to fascinating. And every time I'm in the area, I try to get photographs of leopard sharks. One day I will get even better shots. But it's an important photo to me of just where we all started from. There's actually 5 sharks in the frame. The visibility was not good that day. These shadows in the distance are all more sharks. They're all swarming around, but as soon as any movement happened, they would dart away from you. This is one that, again, got published. It had gotten me foot in the door with Diver Magazine. This is Stage Fort Park during Women Divers Day, like 4 years ago. There's 50 divers in the water. The visibility is 2 feet. But if you're patient and look for the right shot, there's still amazing images to have, even in low visibility, crowded Stage Fort Park. We've all dove it a dozen times. So just watching for behavior. So it's a skate making his way through the eelgrass, probably running away from another group of divers. But he's a great little guy. This is one I mostly am just showing off, that I happened to dive the Chester Poling on a day that you could see the whole wreck. And there are only 2 of us on rebreathers, and we spent about an hour and a half just circling the wreck. If you swam up, you could see the break from the stern. I don't know we got that. It was a June 1st dive, but one of just those shots that probably never be able to recreate because I'll never hit those conditions again. But this point now I'm using video lights. So this is mostly natural light, but I've got 10,000 lumen video lights on the camera for most of these shots. Are seals. I have lots and lots of seal photos, but this is one of my favorites of Curious Seal. Just his texture, his expression as he came up close to the camera. Again, you can see all his buddies in the background. This is one I like to show people. They're cute and they're cuddly. It makes them want to dive it. For people who really want to dive with seals, this is the photo I show them. They're great photos. I usually shoot with acrylic ports, at which don't like seal teeth. So it's usually have to buff them out afterwards. But again, video lights rather than strobes on these shots, which I thought the seals wouldn't like. They seem to actually be very inquisitive. They'll usually bite the light, and then they'll swim over, and then they'll bite the dome, and then they'll bite the other light, and then they'll swim away. Whereas the strobes, sometimes I've found that like after a couple shots, they get a little skittish. This is one of my favorite New England images I've taken. Again, with kind of creative, somewhat accidental lighting. This is our little Cereanthus. This was taken in Rockport, Maine, at Beauchamp Point in the mud. It was one of those great days where the mysid shrimp were mating or they're spawning. So the anemones wouldn't pull in. They were just eating and eating and eating, and you could do anything. And this shot is kind of somewhat by accident. I was shooting, I had 2 CNC strobes. I had one that was much smaller than the other. And my smaller strobe, actually the arm started to give way and fell into the mud. So one strobe fired on the ground coming up underneath the anemones, and another one fired on top of the anemones, giving that color, especially from the white anemone coming up. So again, low visibility day, just getting really close to the subject. Actually, my mom has this one hanging above her piano. I have a copy in my house. It's as a print, as sort of an art piece. It's been one of my most successful photos, kind of by accident, but also reminding us to be creative with how we take our photographs. Can really do a lot with creative lighting, especially as we just heard with Jake, using snoots and other lighting techniques. You can also take all the color away. I love diving with blue sharks up here. I mean, snorkeling, really, they just kind of bob on the surface as they come by. But blue sharks and blue water can be a challenging subject. So this is one that, again, I've had good luck with commercially, of turning it into black and white. You can up the contrast and really show the shark pulling itself away from the blue background. This was in Rhode Island, natural light. Really fun dives. If you guys haven't done it yet, highly recommend a local day trip. And then the bigger sharks. This was again, sort of an accidental shot of, I was on a shoot. There's a Blue World episode about the whale sharks of Dumageddon. And I was free diving down trying to get shots underneath them when I bumped the video photo selector button on my camera and broke it. And I got stuck in still mode, so I got to take a bunch of stills for once. This is all natural light on the surface, but using a 5D Mark IV for stills for once. So it's just a fun capture of it actually pulling the plankton in that it's eating as it comes by me, and then you have to duck out of the way before they hit you, or they will. A vast majority of my diving lately has been in Florida. And this is, again, one fun moment where we were filming manatees for a video project, and this guy wouldn't leave me alone. Sometimes the manatee calves will get kind of attached to you and they'll follow you around. So I took a quick moment, I flipped my camera out of video and took a handful of stills of this guy just sort of hanging out. They'll check out the reflection in the dome port a lot. So if you wait and are patient, they usually come nice and close. But the majority of photos I have and have fallen into my favorites category are caves. I got cave certified a few years ago and have been dying to go into caves ever since. This is a shot at the entrance of a cave called Little River in North Florida. All of the caves in Florida are freshwater, and they are freshwater springs. So as you're swimming into the cave, it's an underground river. You're fighting the current as you go in. The downside to this system is that they all flow into rivers. Now the spring is crystal clear water. The river is mucky brown tannic water that's really cold. There are rare moments though where the river and the spring meet. At Little River, this happens a couple times a year where the river starts to flow into the cave, and the cave is still pushing out with enough force to keep the river water out of the cave, but you can see it in the background. So all this brown background is the tannic river water flowing in and the sun coming through it. You have about a week or two of this before the river eventually wins and the cave fills with brown soupy water and you can't dive it anymore. Until the river level drops, the spring force wins again, and then the cave clears up again. But the state actually closes the caves when the river goes into them, because New England visibility is good compared to the river. So this is a fun moment. This is actually my course director who taught me to be a dive instructor, doing some cave dives with me. And you look closely, she's actually on her decompression bottle because this is a really deep cave. Average depth is about 100 feet. So we were in there for about an hour and a half. So we're doing deco, and it's a great time to take photos because we had about 45 minutes to kill. So you get to position your lights, work on your composition because you're not going anywhere. But the entrance to caves is just a really fun place to play with. This is probably my favorite cave. It's doable as a cavern dive. It technically is an open water dive because the entrance is vertically above you. If you don't go out of that patch of light, you're still considered to be in open water. This is locals call it Jug Hole or Blue Spring in Ichetucknee Springs State Park, but it has a vertical entrance. So at noon, the light comes straight down into the cave, and there's a big room that's shaped like a jug, a little narrow neck on the top that bells out into a huge room. So it's just a fun cave, and you get these just spectacular views that you only have to go to Mexico to find otherwise. That same cave also has one of our favorite places to play in. If you look at the new Blue World intro, you'll see this very spot that I filmed. It's called the Bedding Plane, which is it's a chunk of cave. It's probably about 25 feet long and about 3 feet tall, and about 50 feet wide. So it's a wonderful spot for photography. You can really take your time. There's lights stashed behind my buddy in this shot, as well as lights on the camera. Again, all video lights, because we're shooting mostly video, but we stopped to take some stills here. But you're within the sight of the entrance. You're not far back in the cave. You're at about 40 feet deep. So you have time. You're not worried about having to get back to the entrance. And it's a very dramatic spot. Some people find it a little claustrophobic, but it's wide enough that you can get a model in there. You can get yourself back and sort of position yourself. There is a lot of flow. I took some lights once with some floats on them in there to make them a little lighter, and as soon as I set them, they got blown out of the cave and we had to go rescue them. So it is also very close to the line. If you look behind the buddy, there's actually a gold line behind him, which is the guideline to take us out of the cave. So if anything were to happen, we're within arm's reach of the safety line and we could get out of the cave safely. All of us had about 8 lights on us, so we weren't terribly worried about lights failing. Further back in the caves you go, the less light you have, and the bigger rooms require a little more coordination. So this is where a lot of team progression, teamwork was required to plan out what you're going to do, how you're going to make a shot. This is what's called the gallery in Jenny Springs. It's one of the most spectacular rooms in the cave that everyone swims through and ignores because it's the entrance room. This room is about 60 feet tall and about 200 feet long. It's a massive gallery. It looks like a cathedral in its shape. But again, a lot of water flowing through it. You have to sort of position yourself where you're going to be because you're not going to be still. But again, coordinating with your buddies, again, they've done a very long dive here and we had a lot of decompression obligation. This room's only in about 50 feet of water compared to the 100 feet we had been in most of the cave. So it was part of our decompression profile that as we came out of the cave, we brought lights. There's lights on the ground behind the diver. There's lights clipped to the back of the diver, as well as lights on the camera to illuminate this space. And every time I look at it, all I want is more lights in there. It's really a massive room. So this one came out well. I still want to go back and bring more light. This is probably one of my favorite shots I have taken in a cave. Again, it requires a lot of communication and teamwork. There are 2 divers in this shot. So we communicated, this is again in the cave Little River that has quite a bit of flow in it. So we're working against the flow, we're working against time. We went in, so as a cave diving team, you always, the first person in needs to be the last person out to make sure everyone comes out. So our number 1 diver, we gave him a light array and he led us in, and we set a point at which we were going to turn around. Number 2 diver is the model, and then I was the number 3 diver as the photographer. And we basically gave the number 1 guy, when you turn around, your job is to point this light at the middle diver. And then my job was to position that, because as soon as he turned those lights on, I can't, you can't see past it. That's about 30,000 lumens worth of light shining in my face if I try to signal to him. So it's hard to communicate once the lights are on. But the patience of communicating beforehand, setting up the shot, firing away, as soon as they got to me, I would tell the model to stop. The guy behind him would stop. I'd swim up ahead, reposition a shot, give them the signal to come, and we sort of leapfrog our way like that out of the cave. But it can really bring this wonderful spot, because we are at this point about 110 feet deep, about 500 feet back in the cave. So there is absolutely no natural light. This is all the light we brought, and the way we positioned it, having lights on the diver, behind the diver, and on the camera to pull together one wonderful image. And one of the other things about the Florida Springs is you find mermaids. So one of the things I've been doing a lot of recently is working with mermaids for mermaid events and parties, but also learning about posing and working with models, both divers and free divers or mermaids in the ocean and in the springs. The Florida Springs are just an unbelievably beautiful spot, the crystal clear water. If you need an inland dive trip, I recommend the springs, even for open water divers. There's a lot to see. And that is it. That's what I've got. I had a couple other photos I would have loved to pull out, and I found that one of my hard drives is having some issues, and the backup is in a different house. So lost a couple images.
Well, Zach, very impressive. Very, very impressive. I'm also impressed with the quality of the work, but also the work involved in getting the shot. It's it makes taking pictures of crabs in Folly Cove seem kind of simple. Wow, very impressive. Does anyone have any questions? We have some. How much air do you take on those dives? Debbie is asking.
The most of the dives, I can't see my cursor anymore. So cave diving, you have to have at least 2 cylinders that are at least bigger than 72 cubic feet. Typically, we are diving 85 cubic foot cylinders. In Florida, if you guys aren't familiar with this, the idea of cave fills.
Cave fills?
Cave fills. So Florida cave divers like to stay down a long time. So they will take a low pressure tank, and they figure that they are hydro to 3,800 PSI or 3,600 PSI. So they will fill their low pressure tanks to 36, 38, 4,400 pounds. I've had low pressure tanks in Florida that come back filled with a 4,500 PSI.
Yikes.
So never buy a steel tank from any cave diver in Florida. They can survive that. The burst disc is 5,000 PSI on those tanks. So they can handle it, but it stretches the steel and they will fail hydro faster. So I never fill my tanks that much, but if I rent tanks and they come filled that way already, who am I to not use the gas?
Wow.
But when we do any kind of decompression dive, we also always bring at least a 40 cubic foot tank of oxygen with us. If we do a longer dive, we bring stage bottles. If I'm bringing a camera, they're shorter dives. I've done some really long dives in caves, but there's actually one that cave that shot in Jenny Springs. We had the camera with us to photograph some whale vertebra, fossilized whale vertebra from when all that limestone was ocean bed. And we weren't going to make it with the drag of the camera. So I literally, when we dropped our stage bottles, I clipped the camera off to the line and just left it. And so the camera definitely limits how far you get back, because, you know, the drag on a dome port when you're pushing it into the underground flow is real.
Would it be possible to use a rebreather? Or is that
Oh,
just
absolutely. And I have a rebreather. It's just a matter of the people I'm with aren't on rebreathers, and it's another level to get it down there. So one day, absolutely. But right now for flying, you know, it's flying with the rebreather adds a huge amount of cost, and then buying the gas fills and the soft lime, and you know, my cave instructor was Jill Heinrich, and I asked her in my class like where she goes for her photos, and she showed me her secret photo spot, and it's within 10 feet of the entrance. So a lot of the cave doesn't change a lot the further back you go, unless there's something to see. Most of the cool stuff in the cave is within a few hundred feet of the entrance. So a lot of film projects, we don't go very far into the cave. We just you know, work and get the shot in the entrance, and then head out.
Another question on what kind of lenses, wide angle lens are you using for in the cave shots?
So for almost all of those cave shots, those were shot on a Tokina fisheye, the 10-17, on a Canon 5D Mark IV. So they had to crop in a little bit because it's an APS-C lens on a full frame camera. Today I'm shooting mostly with a GH5 with a 7mm aspherical wide angle. So it's a micro four thirds sensor, so we're losing some of the wide angle capacity there. But the wider the better. I'm looking into getting one of the Nauticam wet adapt wide angle lenses. A lot of people are really liking those. But for caves, the wider the better. It's like any other underwater subject. You want to get as close to your subject to get as much light onto it as possible. So I did switch from an 8-inch dome to a 6-inch dome, just for maneuvering it in and out of caves. It's helped me out quite a bit. I like my big dome, but the smaller one gets scratched a lot less.
Well, Zach, thank you. There aren't any other questions? So I think that was pretty fabulous. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank Paula for your first time at presenting. We appreciate that. And Jake, again, wish you a good trip. And for all of you, thanks for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you in June.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Andy.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Galapagos trip, he's gonna be gone a year?
No,
Where's he
hang
going
on,
now?
hang on. Thanks, Andy.
You're welcome, Chuck.
Yeah,
Thanks for
catch up.
tuning
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, Joni.
Bye.
Bye, Whitney.
Bye, Joni. Bye, Chuck.
Might see you tomorrow.
Yeah, it's my day off, so you and the
Oh, is
boys.
Okay.
Or I'll see you this weekend.
Okay, yeah. All right, take care.
Good night.
Thanks.
Good night, Ellen. Zach, I see you're still on. Fabulous stuff. Very impressed.
Thanks.
Very, very impressed.
Thanks. Yeah, we were in Mexico cave diving, so we've got a little bit of new stuff coming. I couldn't get it sorted for this. Again, we had just the issue with our guides weren't feeling well, and we weren't sure why they weren't feeling well.
Uh-huh.
And then, yeah, they told us that, yeah, their previous guest had COVID, and that they didn't tell us. And then we got COVID and got stuck in Mexico an extra week, lying in a hotel room sick. It was not
That sounds
fun. We
awful.
didn't get to go to the best dives we wanted to do. So
Were you able to get any dives in before? This happened at the end of the trip or the beginning?
we did, yeah. My fiance Annalise finished her intro to cave class, so we got that done, which was the main goal. And we did get there's one good day of good video dives. And one really decorated cave had a lot of stalactites and really white limestone. But we got, maybe there's a video in there somewhere, but
Okay.
it wasn't the trip we hoped for. And then, of course, my other friend Marissa, we were hanging down there. She borrowed some photo gear I forgot from her, and then she left just after that to Socorro
Oh,
on the Vortex.
so it means like a 30-hour trip with the. Did they put her on the dinghy and then drag her
Yep,
along
she
the
jumped
way?
on the dinghy and has been hanging Cabo, and like she lost her rebreather, her camera, all her gear. Yeah. Yeah, she'd planned it for years to bring her rebreather to like go down with the manta rays deeper, and so
Brutal.
yeah, I'm trying to see if I can help her get a secondhand camera and save her some money that way. But
Oh,
yeah, it's just I saw the news. I actually went on that boat a couple of years ago, and it's a shame. It was a really nice liveaboard.
yeah.
Wow. Well. Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
This is bad. Oh, that's bad.
Yeah. At least you got some good Mexican food then, huh?
We got some really good food.
Yeah.
We got some good food in there. We got to go see some pyramids, and
Yeah.
all our family got nice Mexican vanilla when we got back. So
All
it wasn't
right.
a total
Good,
loss.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, thanks again, Zach.
Oh, anytime.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
All right.
All
Good
right.
night, all.
Good night.
Good night.